Annyeong, it's Mikey here, and my apologies that there is no proper intro. I lost the footage, and I didn't really have time to film it again. We're going to be going over the Wuque Studio Cullinan and Ocean Switch, which we have to see, are these worth the prices? So let's go into it, but please make sure to like and subscribe. So right away, these two switches are probably one of the better switches you can possibly get from HE. You can really tell that they are deeper sounding switches without like the HE-ish sound that comes from it. You can also tell that these two are still quite different from each other. Like the Cullinan is obviously a little bit deeper, while the Ocean is a little bit poppier as a whole. Now, in terms of the loudness, they're very similar in terms of the decibels. So I'm showing you guys one of the decibel tests in general, but overall, the sound test wise, in terms of how they are in front of you, I mean, it depends on your layout and how your build is built. So your board with like CF plate or alu plate might be louder, but they're going to be averaging around like the 66, 67 decibel point, which is going to be about the decibels of people talking around you. Now, keep in mind that it will really depend on your keyboard and how it's built. Now, one of the things that I wanted to test here was like the travel test. So here you start off at 15.1 millimeters, goes down to 11.7, but trying again to make sure we actually get 15.2 all the way down to 11.7, which is going to be the 3.5 millimeter travel mark. Now, this is what they said is the travel, so it makes sense and it's matching up with that. I think overall 3.5 millimeters is pretty average with all different HE switches, how much travel there is. Actually, Gadron even went down to 3.2 millimeters. I think I'm not a big fan of the shorter travel. I would love to see travel go back to 4 millimeters. I think that's like the benefit, right, of Hall Effect is being able to use full travel and being able to change the acceleration depending on that. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things where people think that shorter travel is a bit better, and I think a lot of companies have been doing it just for the purposes of maybe sound-wise. Now, as you can see here, opening up the switch is not going to be simple. So you actually need the special opener, like you'll see here. If you buy these metal ones, like the magnetic switch openers, they actually have two sides to them. The one with the flat sides can actually open it up. So here we are opening it up to take a look, and one of the things that's interesting about these switches is they're not really heavily lubed. They're actually very light lubed. And it's going to be a little bit hard to see through the camera here, especially with the lighting and what kind of color these stems are. But the lubing is going to be quite light. And I feel like HE switches are kind of moving towards that area where they're getting the stems to be just good and right, where you don't have to have them heavy lubed anymore. You don't really have to hand lube them anymore. These switches don't really change by hand lubing. I've tried a little bit testing to see if it needed it and if there would be any comparisons, but because it didn't really sound any different, I didn't actually end up hand lubing them and keeping it as is. Now you'll see something interesting on the bottom of this pole. So you'll see there's like a little cutout in the middle. The plastic piece is actually sticking out a little bit, not a lot, but a very, very tiny bit, so that the plastic actually hits first. But I think because it's so little of a point that it's actually not really helping in terms of the full like sound. It's still the metal hitting at the end of it. Now the springs are supposed to be 23 millimeters, but my measurement was coming up around the actual 22 millimeter mark. So my measurement could be not fully accurate, but these are going to be longer springs, and I think this longer springs in general help with HE switches. I think what I've come to realize is 1, longer springs, 2, maybe changing it from just a single stage to actually more than that would help a lot with these switches. In general, all Hall Effect switches. And the point I think is also very useful. Now this is going to be the Cullinan, and the Cullinan, again, is very hard to see because of how transparent it is, but the overall switch is very, very light lubed. And you don't really need to lube them. That's the nice part. They are smooth and works really well. So there's big improvements that they've done with the switch, and as you can see, the design of the switches is very different too. You'll have the 4 corners for the rails instead of your usual side rails on a regular HE switch or even like a mechanical switch. Now this is also cut out as well, and you can see the plastic bit even better here where it's pointing out and it's gonna hit first, which I think really does improve the sound overall. But there's still some things that are missing to make HE really good, and I think overall we'll have to see how things happen. Now, I do have some updates that are going to come up soon, and hopefully that brings in some good news for HE. Now, in terms of how these switches feel, both of them feel quite different. Even though they're not supposed to be different in weight, you actually feel that the overall Cullinan feels a little bit heavier than the Heart of Ocean. So as you can see, like, when I'm actually pressing down and testing them, the Cullinan feels just slightly heavier, but both are smooth and both have a very linear movement feel. Not like actuation bump or feel like that, but just very linear feel overall. Now the top out. So the top out wise, I think because they made it a softer housing, it does help with the whole Hall effect top out sound. Now in terms of the top end, so as you can see here, the top end movement is actually mostly the switch moving inside of the plate. It's not a bad thing, so keep in mind, right? The switch moving inside the plate, it's not a horrible thing. I actually is not going to be like a huge effect in terms of, say, the overall sensor and actuation and accuracy. And the switch in general doesn't have any stem wobble. I think Hall effect switches really have very little stem wobble in a whole, and mostly it's going to be movement within the plate itself. So something to definitely keep in mind for this. Now, the Cullinan and the Ocean are both like this, like both very no wobble at all at the top end, and then no stem wobble when you press it down either. It's just the switches actually moving inside of the plate, and because it's a little bit smaller than a certain plate. But of course, it depends on the plate you're using, right? The Sonic would have been a little bit tighter than this one comparatively, and this is a Wooting FR4 plate, and you can see the movement. Now in terms of the lighting, I would say that they're both going to be pretty accurate and very, very bright. Like you're going to get very, very bright lighting with both switches. I honestly thought the Oceans would actually come out a lot more blue, but it actually is very similar to the Cullinan in terms of how the lighting is. So if you are someone who really likes the bright RGB, this is going to help. And because these switches aren't singular in terms of how the lighting can come through, you can actually use it with some other HE keyboards out there that actually have the lighting that comes through both sides, top and bottom. There's even going to be some boards out there that actually have the lighting coming from all four corners, and that would make the switch incredibly bright. My overall thoughts though is that the Cullinan is a little bit better in terms of the deeper sounding. If you want more popular sounding, you're going to want to stick with the Heart. I honestly think that the pricing though is not really worth it. I really think it's way too expensive. I understand the value aspect. I get that, you know, comparing this and then combining it with a Hall effect board is going to make it seem more valuable. But for those out there that really want to just mod Hall effect boards, this is too expensive. So I really do hope Wuque Studio sees this and they're willing to change the price. But go check it out. The links will be in the description. I'll see you guys next time.